What if the person you believed you had buried forever suddenly appeared at your door, alive and demanding answers? This is the chilling reality for Richard Garrison, a man who crafted a new life after the tragic disappearance of his wife, Sarah. For 7 long years, Richard played the role of the grieving husband, skillfully masking the truth behind a facade of sorrow and success. He built a thriving business, married again, and convinced everyone around him that he was a victim of fate. But fate had other plans. On a quiet evening in Atlanta, the doorbell rang and Richard's world shattered. Standing before him was Sarah, her presence a haunting reminder of the life he thought he had left behind. With visible signs of trauma etched across her face, she was not the ghost he had imagined. She was flesh and blood, and she had come back for justice. As Richard's heart raced, he was forced to confront the darkest secret of his past. The night he took Sarah's life during a trip to Africa, burying her in a shallow grave, convinced he could escape the consequences. But Sarah's survival was a testament to her strength, and now she was ready to expose the truth. What will happen when the hunter becomes the hunted? As the layers of deception unravel, Richard must face the reality of his actions and the woman he thought he had silenced forever. Join us as we explore this harrowing tale of betrayal, survival, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Stay tuned, because the shocking revelations are just beginning, and you won't want to miss what happens next. This story is not just about one man's betrayal and another's survival. It's a powerful reminder of the complexities of love, trust, and the lengths to which people will go to escape their past. We want to hear from you. What do you think about Richard's actions? How would you react if faced with a similar situation? Your opinions matter, and sharing your thoughts can spark important conversations about betrayal and resilience. If you or someone you know has experienced a similar journey, we encourage you to share your story in the comments below. Your experiences can provide insight and support to others who may be facing their own struggles. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more gripping true crime stories that delve into the human psyche and the darker sides of life. By liking and sharing this video, you help us reach a larger audience, raising awareness about these critical issues. Together, we can create a community that fosters understanding and healing. Join us on this journey, and let's uncover the truth behind the headlines. Your voice is powerful, let it be heard. In the heart of Atlanta, where the bustling city life masks the shadows of its past, a story of betrayal and survival unfolds, a tale that will leave you questioning the very nature of trust. Meet Richard Garrison, a man who, for 7 long years, wore the mask of a grieving husband. After the tragic disappearance of his wife, Sarah, Richard crafted a new life, one filled with success and a fresh start. He built a thriving business, married again, and became a respected figure in his community. To the outside world, Richard was the embodiment of resilience, a man who had overcome unimaginable loss. But beneath this polished exterior lay a dark secret, one that would soon come crashing down around him. Sarah Garrison, once a vibrant and loving partner, was presumed dead after a fateful trip to Africa. The couple's marriage had been strained, riddled with infidelity and financial troubles, leading Richard to commit the unthinkable. In a moment of rage and desperation, he took Sarah's life, burying her in a shallow grave, convinced he could escape the consequences of his actions. For years he lived with the weight of his crime, believing he had silenced the truth forever. But fate has a way of unraveling even the most tightly woven lies. One quiet evening, as Richard settled into his new life, the doorbell rang, shattering the illusion he had so carefully constructed. Standing on his doorstep was Sarah, alive, breathing, and bearing the scars of her harrowing ordeal. Her return was not just a shock, it was a reckoning. As Richard's heart raced, he was thrust into a nightmare of his own making. The woman he thought he had buried was back, and she was ready to confront him. What would happen when the truth emerged from the shadows? How would Richard face the consequences of his betrayal? In the aftermath of Sarah Garrison's disappearance, Richard Garrison emerged as a man transformed. The once vibrant couple who had shared dreams and aspirations was now reduced to a haunting memory. Richard, however, was determined to rebuild his life, to rise from the ashes of his past. He threw himself into his work, channeling his grief into a burgeoning business that quickly gained traction in Atlanta's competitive market. With each success, he felt a fleeting sense of relief, a momentary escape from the guilt that gnawed at him like a relentless predator. Richard's new venture, a tech startup focused on innovative solutions for small businesses, became the centerpiece of his life. He surrounded himself with a team of dedicated employees who admired his vision and leadership. As the company flourished, so did Richard's reputation. He was hailed as a local entrepreneur, a man who had turned tragedy into triumph. The community embraced him, offering support and accolades, unaware of the dark secret that lay beneath his polished exterior. In his personal life, Richard sought solace in the arms of a new partner, Emily. Their relationship blossomed quickly, fueled by Richard's desire to escape the shadows of his past. Emily, a kind-hearted woman with a nurturing spirit, saw Richard as a man in need of healing. She believed in his potential and was drawn to his charisma and ambition. Together they created a life that seemed idyllic, a beautiful home, shared laughter, and plans for a future that sparkled with promise. Yet even in the warmth of their love, Richard felt the cold grip of his past lurking just beneath the surface. As the years passed, Richard became adept at masking his emotions. He learned to smile through the pain, to laugh at the right moments, and to engage in conversations that distracted him from the truth. But the guilt was a constant companion, whispering reminders of the life he had stolen from Sarah. He often found himself staring into the mirror, searching for the man he once was, but all he saw was a stranger, a man who had committed an unspeakable act and had to live with the consequences. The community viewed Richard as a tragic figure, a man who had lost his wife under mysterious circumstances. They offered their condolences, shared their sympathy, and rallied around him as he navigated the complexities of grief. Friends and neighbors would often reminisce about Sarah, recalling her vibrant spirit and infectious laughter. Richard would nod along, his heart heavy with the knowledge that he was the architect of her demise. Each shared memory felt like a dagger, piercing through the facade he had so carefully constructed. Richard's emotional state was a turbulent sea, with waves of guilt crashing against the shores of his new life. He often found himself haunted by nightmares, visions of Sarah's face, twisted in pain and betrayal. He would wake in a cold sweat, gasping for breath, the weight of his actions pressing down on him like a suffocating blanket. In those moments he would remind himself of the life he had built, the love he had found with Emily, and the success he had achieved. It was a fragile balance, one that required constant vigilance to maintain. Despite his efforts to move forward, Richard's past was an ever-present shadow. He avoided places that reminded him of Sarah, steering clear of their favorite restaurants and parks. He distanced himself from mutual friends, fearing that their conversations would lead to uncomfortable questions. The more he tried to escape, the more entangled he became in the web of his own lies. As Richard continued to navigate his dual existence, he became increasingly aware of the cracks in his perfect facade. The pressure to maintain the illusion of a happy life weighed heavily on him, and he found himself retreating into solitude when the world became too overwhelming. In those quiet moments, he would replay the events of that fateful night in Africa, the choices that had led him to commit the unthinkable. The guilt was a relentless tide, threatening to pull him under, and he struggled to keep his head above water. Richard's life was a carefully curated performance, one that required constant effort to uphold. He attended community events, spoke at local business forums, and engaged in charitable activities, all while hiding the truth that lay beneath the surface. The accolades and praise he received only deepened his internal conflict, as he grappled with the knowledge that he was living a lie. As the years rolled on, Richard's carefully constructed world began to show signs of strain. The weight of his guilt and the fear of being discovered loomed large, casting a shadow over every aspect of his life. He became increasingly paranoid, convinced that someone would uncover the truth. The thought of Sarah returning, of her confronting him with the reality of what he had done, was a nightmare that haunted his waking hours. Yet, despite the turmoil within, Richard continued to play the role of the grieving husband turned successful entrepreneur. He smiled for the cameras, laughed with friends, and embraced the life he had built, all while knowing that the past was never truly buried. The truth was a ticking time bomb, waiting for the right moment to explode and shatter the illusion he had created. As Richard navigated this precarious existence, the stage was set for a confrontation that would change everything. Little did he know that the very woman he thought he had silenced would soon return, ready to expose the truth and demand justice. The perfect facade he had built was about to crumble, and the world he had created would be turned upside down. To understand the harrowing events that would ultimately lead to Sarah Garrison's disappearance, we must first delve into the complex tapestry of her marriage to Richard Garrison. Their relationship, once filled with love and promise, had become a battleground of unresolved issues, financial strain, and emotional turmoil. Richard and Sarah met in college, where their chemistry was undeniable. They were the quintessential couple, often seen laughing together, sharing dreams of a bright future. However, as the years passed, the pressures of adulthood began to take their toll. After graduating, they faced the harsh realities of life: student loans, job instability, and the relentless pursuit of financial security. The weight of these challenges began to erode the foundation of their relationship. Richard, ambitious and driven, found himself increasingly consumed by his desire for success. He poured himself into his work, often at the expense of his marriage. Sarah, on the other hand, sought connection and reassurance, feeling neglected and unappreciated. As Richard climbed the corporate ladder, he became more distant, retreating into a world of late nights and business meetings. The couple's once vibrant communication dwindled, replaced by arguments over finances and unmet expectations. The strain of their financial troubles only exacerbated the growing rift between them. Richard's desire to provide for Sarah led him to make risky investments, hoping to secure a better future. However, these ventures often backfired, leaving them in deeper debt. Sarah, frustrated by their precarious situation, began to question Richard's judgment and commitment. The tension in their home became palpable, with each argument pushing them further apart. In the midst of this turmoil, Richard sought solace outside of his marriage. He began an affair with a coworker, a decision that would have devastating consequences. The thrill of the illicit relationship provided a temporary escape from his crumbling marriage, but it also deepened his feelings of guilt and shame. Richard was caught in a vicious cycle. His infidelity fueled his desire to hide the truth from Sarah, while the weight of his deception only added to the emotional distance between them. As the couple prepared for a trip to Africa, ostensibly to rekindle their relationship, the underlying tensions reached a boiling point. Richard hoped that the adventure would help them reconnect, but Sarah sensed the growing divide. The trip was fraught with conflict as unresolved issues bubbled to the surface. They argued over finances, Richard's late nights, and the affair that Sarah had yet to uncover. Each confrontation felt like a step closer to the edge, a precarious balance that could tip at any moment. On the fateful night of the crime, the couple found themselves in a remote area of Africa, far from the comforts of home. The setting was beautiful, with the stars twinkling overhead, but the atmosphere between them was charged with tension. After a day of exploring, they returned to their accommodations, where the weight of their unresolved issues hung heavily in the air. As they sat together, the conversation turned heated. Sarah confronted Richard about his emotional distance, her voice trembling with frustration. She demanded to know why he had been so secretive, why he had been so absent in their marriage. Richard, feeling cornered and defensive, lashed out. The argument escalated, fueled by years of pent-up resentment and betrayal. In a moment of rage, Richard's emotions spiraled out of control. In a fit of anger, he struck Sarah, the force of his actions shocking both of them. The reality of what he had done crashed over him like a tidal wave. In that instant, the man who had once loved her became a stranger, consumed by fear and desperation. Richard realized that he had crossed an irreversible line, and panic set in. He could not bear the thought of facing the consequences of his actions, nor could he imagine a life without Sarah. In a frantic attempt to cover up his crime, Richard made a fateful decision. He dragged Sarah's lifeless body to a nearby clearing, his heart racing as he fought against the rising tide of guilt and horror. The moonlight illuminated the scene, casting eerie shadows as he dug a shallow grave, his hands trembling with each scoop of dirt. The weight of his actions pressed down on him, but he was determined to escape the reality he had created. As he buried Sarah, Richard felt a mix of emotions: fear, guilt, and a chilling sense of relief. He believed he had silenced the truth, convinced that he could return to his life as if nothing had happened. But deep down he knew that the darkness of his actions would haunt him forever. The aftermath of that night would shape the course of his life, leaving scars that would never fully heal. In the days that followed, Richard returned to Atlanta, attempting to resume his life as if nothing had changed. He donned the mask of the grieving husband, playing the part to perfection. But the truth was a relentless specter, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the moment to emerge. The facade he had built was fragile, and the weight of his guilt threatened to crush him at any moment. As Richard navigated his new reality, the world around him continued to turn. Friends and family offered their condolences, unaware of the truth that lay buried beneath the surface. Richard's life became a delicate balancing act, one that required constant vigilance to maintain. He was a man living in fear, haunted by the memory of the woman he had loved and lost, and the crime that would eventually come back to claim him. In the wake of the brutal attack that left Sarah Garrison for dead, a remarkable story of survival began to unfold, one that would defy the odds and challenge the very notion of resilience. Buried in a shallow grave, Sarah was not merely a victim, she was a fighter and her journey was just beginning. As darkness enveloped her, Sarah's consciousness flickered in and out, her body instinctively reacting to the suffocating weight of the earth above her. The shock of betrayal coursed through her veins, mingling with the adrenaline that surged as she fought against the encroaching darkness. In those harrowing moments, she clung to the flickering hope that she could escape the grave that had become her prison. With every ounce of strength she could muster, Sarah began to claw her way back to life. The dirt was heavy and her lungs burned as she gasped for air, but the instinct to survive propelled her forward. She remembered the warmth of the sun on her skin, the laughter they once shared, and the dreams they had built together. Those memories fueled her determination, igniting a fire within her that refused to be extinguished. After what felt like an eternity, Sarah broke through the surface, gasping for breath as she emerged into the cool night air. The stars twinkled above her, a stark contrast to the darkness she had just escaped. Disoriented and weak, she struggled to comprehend the reality of her situation. She was alive, but the trauma of her experience weighed heavily on her mind and body. In the days that followed, Sarah fought to regain her strength. She wandered through the wilderness, disoriented and terrified, unsure of where to go or how to find help. The physical toll of her ordeal was immense. Her body bore the scars of her struggle, and her mind was a battlefield of confusion and fear. Yet, even in her darkest moments, Sarah's spirit remained unbroken. She was determined to reclaim her life, to find a way back to the world she had been so cruelly ripped from. As she navigated the unfamiliar terrain, Sarah encountered a group of local villagers who would become her lifeline. They were kind-hearted individuals who recognized her distress and offered their support. With their help, she was able to find shelter, food, and most importantly, a sense of safety. The villagers listened to her story, their compassion providing a balm for her wounded soul. They became her support system, helping her to heal both physically and emotionally. During her recovery, Sarah faced the daunting task of piecing together the fragments of her memory. The trauma of the attack had left her with gaps in her recollection, and she struggled to make sense of what had happened. With the encouragement of her newfound friends, she began to confront the reality of her situation. Each day was a battle, but Sarah was determined to reclaim her identity and her life. As she regained her strength, Sarah also began to rediscover her voice. She shared her story with the villagers, recounting the events that had led to her near-fatal encounter with Richard. Her words were a powerful testament to her resilience, and they resonated deeply with those who listened. In sharing her experience, Sarah found a sense of purpose, a desire to raise awareness about domestic violence and the importance of survival. Eventually, Sarah's journey led her back to the United States, where she sought justice for the betrayal she had endured. With the support of the villagers who had become her family, she was able to navigate the complexities of returning to a life that had once felt so familiar yet now seemed foreign. The transition was not easy, the emotional scars of her experience ran deep, and the memories of her past haunted her. However, Sarah's determination to reclaim her life was unwavering. She sought therapy to help process her trauma, finding solace in the guidance of professionals who understood the complexities of her experience. Through therapy, she learned to confront her fears, to embrace her strength, and to transform her pain into a source of empowerment. As she began to heal, Sarah also found a community of survivors who had faced similar struggles. They became her allies, sharing their stories and supporting one another in their journeys toward recovery. Together, they formed a network of strength, proving that even in the face of unimaginable adversity, hope could flourish. Sarah's transformation was not just about survival, it was about reclaiming her narrative. She became an advocate for others who had experienced domestic violence, using her voice to raise awareness and inspire change. Her story resonated with many, and she became a beacon of hope for those who felt trapped in their circumstances. As Sarah prepared to confront Richard and seek justice for the life he had stolen from her, she was armed with the knowledge that she was not alone. The support system she had built, the strength she had discovered within herself, and the community of survivors who stood beside her would guide her through the challenges ahead. In the face of betrayal, Sarah Garrison emerged not just as a survivor but as a warrior, a woman who had clawed her way back from the brink and was ready to reclaim her life. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but she was determined to face them head-on, fueled by the resilience that had carried her through the darkest of times. After years of struggle and transformation, Sarah Garrison was finally ready to return to the place where her life had been shattered. Atlanta, a city that once held the promise of love and happiness, now loomed as a reminder of her darkest days. But this time she was not the same woman who had been buried alive in a shallow grave. She was a survivor, a warrior, and she was determined to confront the man who had tried to erase her existence. As Sarah made her way back to Atlanta, a whirlwind of emotions surged within her. The memories of her past flooded her mind, moments of laughter, love, and ultimately betrayal. Each mile brought her closer to Richard, the man who had once been her partner but had become her greatest enemy. The thought of facing him filled her with a mix of dread and resolve. She had spent years rebuilding her life, and now it was time to reclaim her narrative. Arriving in the city, Sarah felt a sense of empowerment wash over her. She had come to understand the importance of her story, not just for herself but for others who had faced similar struggles. With the support of her newfound community and the strength she had cultivated through her journey, she was ready to confront Richard and demand justice for the life he had stolen from her. As she approached Richard's home, her heart raced. The familiar neighborhood felt foreign, a ghost of the life she had once known. She stood before his door, her hand trembling as she raised it to knock. This was the moment she had envisioned countless times. The moment when she would finally confront the man who had betrayed her. With a deep breath, she knocked, the sound echoing in the stillness of the evening. Inside, Richard was unaware of the storm that was about to engulf his carefully constructed life. He had settled into a routine, blissfully ignorant of the consequences of his past. As he opened the door, the sight of Sarah standing before him sent shockwaves through his body. His heart dropped and disbelief washed over him. The woman he had buried, the ghost he had tried to forget, was alive and standing right in front of him. "Sarah?" he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. The shock in his eyes was palpable, a mixture of fear and confusion. He had spent years convincing himself that he had escaped the consequences of his actions, but now reality had come crashing down. "Hello, Richard," Sarah replied, her voice steady but laced with emotion. The weight of their shared history hung heavily in the air, a silent acknowledgement of the pain and betrayal that had defined their relationship. "We need to talk." Richard stepped back, instinctively trying to close the door, but Sarah pushed her way inside, her determination overpowering his instinct to retreat. The familiar surroundings felt suffocating, a stark reminder of the life they had once shared. "You can't just pretend this never happened," she said, her voice rising with intensity. "You can't erase what you did to me." Richard's mind raced as he struggled to process the reality of the situation. "I thought you were dead," he stammered, desperation creeping into his voice. "I thought I had lost you forever." "Lost me?" Sarah shot back, her eyes blazing with anger. "You didn't lose me, Richard. You killed me. You buried me alive and thought you could escape the truth. But I survived, and now I'm here to make sure you face the consequences." The confrontation was electric, charged with the emotions of years of pain and betrayal. Richard's facade began to crack as the weight of Sarah's words sank in. He had built a new life, but now it felt like a house of cards, teetering on the brink of collapse. "I didn't mean to," he began, but Sarah cut him off. "Didn't mean to? You made a choice, Richard. You chose to end my life because you couldn't face the truth. You chose to bury me and pretend it never happened. But I'm not going to let you hide anymore." As the tension in the room escalated, Richard's demeanor shifted from shock to defensiveness. "You don't understand what I went through. I was scared. I didn't know what to do." His voice trembled, revealing the cracks in his carefully constructed facade. "Scared?" Sarah echoed, incredulity lacing her tone. "You were scared? What about me? I was the one fighting for my life, clawing my way out of that grave while you went on living as if nothing had happened. You don't get to play the victim here." The emotional confrontation reached a fever pitch, each word a dagger that pierced through the layers of denial Richard had wrapped around himself. Sarah's voice trembled with a mix of anger and pain, but beneath it all lay a fierce determination. "I'm here to reclaim my life, Richard. I'm here to make sure you understand the gravity of what you did." Richard's expression shifted, a flicker of realization dawning in his eyes. The woman standing before him was not the same person he had betrayed. She was a force to be reckoned with. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I want you to face the truth," Sarah replied, her voice steady. "I want you to understand the pain you caused, not just to me but to everyone who loved me. I want justice for what you did." As the weight of her words hung in the air, Richard felt the walls closing in around him. The life he had built was crumbling, and the truth he had buried was rising to the surface. Sarah's return was not just a confrontation. It was a reckoning, a moment that would change everything. In that charged atmosphere, the past and present collided, and the consequences of Richard's actions loomed large. The emotional stakes had never been higher, and the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty. But one thing was clear: Sarah was no longer a victim, she was a survivor, and she was ready to fight for her truth. The moment Sarah Garrison confronted Richard was not just a turning point in their personal saga. It marked the beginning of a legal battle that would captivate the nation. With her heart pounding and her resolve solidified, Sarah made the courageous decision to report Richard for attempted murder. She knew that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but she was determined to seek justice for the life he had tried to take from her. After her return to Atlanta, Sarah immediately contacted the authorities, recounting the harrowing details of her ordeal. The police were initially skeptical, given the years that had passed since her presumed death. However, Sarah's unwavering conviction and the evidence she provided, her scars, her story, and the physical location of her burial, compelled them to take her seriously. The investigation quickly gained momentum, and Richard's world began to unravel. Richard was arrested at his home, the very place where he had built a new life, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to engulf him. The news of his arrest sent shockwaves through the community. Friends and neighbors who had once rallied around him as a grieving husband were now left grappling with the reality of his actions. The facade he had maintained for so long crumbled, revealing the truth that lay beneath. As the legal proceedings unfolded, the courtroom became a battleground for truth and justice. Sarah, now a key witness, faced the daunting task of reliving her trauma in front of a judge and jury. Each testimony was a reminder of the pain she had endured, but she stood firm, fueled by the desire to ensure that Richard faced the consequences of his actions. Her courage inspired others, and her story resonated with many who had experienced similar struggles. The trial was a media sensation, drawing attention from across the country. Reporters flocked to the courthouse, eager to capture every detail of the case that had captivated the public's imagination. Sarah's resilience shone through as she took the stand, her voice steady as she recounted the events leading up to her attack and the years of suffering that followed. She spoke not only for herself but for all those who had been silenced by violence. Richard's defense team attempted to paint a different picture, arguing that Sarah's return was a fabrication, a desperate attempt to seek attention. They claimed that Richard had been a victim of circumstance, a man who had acted out of fear and confusion. But the evidence was overwhelming. The prosecution presented a compelling case, detailing Richard's actions and the premeditated nature of his crime. The jury listened intently, weighing the evidence against the backdrop of Sarah's harrowing testimony. As the trial progressed, the emotional toll on Sarah was immense. She faced not only the scrutiny of the legal system but also the weight of her past. Yet with each passing day she grew stronger. The support of her community, her friends, and fellow survivors bolstered her resolve. They rallied around her, reminding her that she was not alone in her fight for justice. Finally, after weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. Richard Garrison was found guilty of attempted murder, and the courtroom erupted in a mixture of relief and disbelief. Sarah felt a wave of emotions wash over her: anger, sadness, but most importantly, a sense of vindication. The man who had tried to erase her was now being held accountable for his actions. The sentencing phase of the trial was equally intense. Richard faced the possibility of life in prison, a fate that would forever alter the course of his life. As he stood before the judge, the weight of his choices bore down on him. Sarah, now a symbol of resilience, had the opportunity to address the court. With unwavering strength, she spoke about the impact of his actions on her life, her family, and her community. Her words were powerful, a testament to her journey from victim to survivor. In the end, the judge sentenced Richard to life in prison, a decision that echoed through the courtroom. As the gavel struck, Sarah felt a sense of closure wash over her. Justice had been served, but the journey was far from over. While the legal battle had concluded, the emotional scars of her experience would take time to heal. In the months that followed, Sarah focused on her recovery, determined to reclaim her life fully. She sought therapy to help process the trauma she had endured, finding solace in the guidance of professionals who understood the complexities of her experience. Through therapy, she learned to confront her fears, embrace her strength, and transform her pain into a source of empowerment. Sarah also became an advocate for survivors of domestic violence, using her voice to raise awareness and inspire change. She shared her story at community events, schools, and support groups, encouraging others to speak out and seek help. Her journey resonated with many, and she became a beacon of hope for those who felt trapped in their circumstances. As she continued to heal, Sarah found a sense of purpose in her advocacy work. She connected with organizations dedicated to supporting survivors, helping to create resources and programs that would empower others to reclaim their lives. Her strength and resilience inspired countless individuals, proving that even in the face of unimaginable adversity, hope could flourish. Sarah's journey was a testament to the power of survival and transformation. She had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, refusing to be defined by her past. The road ahead would still be challenging, but she was ready to embrace her future with open arms. In the end, Sarah Garrison's story was not just one of survival. It was a powerful reminder that the human spirit is capable of incredible resilience. She had fought for her life, for her truth, and for justice, and in doing so, she had become a voice for those who had been silenced. The story of Sarah Garrison is one that resonates deeply with the themes of betrayal, survival, and justice. It serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of trust and the devastating consequences that can arise when that trust is shattered. Richard's betrayal was not just a personal affront. It was a violation of the very essence of their relationship, a dark chapter that would alter the course of both their lives forever. Sarah's journey from victim to survivor is a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Her ability to confront her past, seek justice, and ultimately reclaim her life is an inspiring narrative that highlights the strength found in vulnerability. It challenges us to consider the lengths one must go to in order to heal and the courage it takes to stand up against those who have wronged us. As we reflect on Sarah's story, we are compelled to ask ourselves, can we truly forgive those who have caused us profound pain? What does forgiveness mean in the context of trauma, and how does it shape our ability to move forward? These questions linger, inviting us to explore the complexities of human relationships and the impact of our choices. In a world where stories of survival and resilience often go unheard, Sarah's experience shines a light on the importance of speaking out and seeking justice. It encourages us to support one another, to listen to the voices of survivors, and to advocate for change in a society that too often turns a blind eye to domestic violence. As we conclude this gripping tale, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think about the nature of forgiveness? How do you believe trauma shapes our lives and relationships? Your insights are invaluable, and we encourage you to engage in this important conversation. If you found Sarah's story compelling, be sure to subscribe for more true crime narratives that delve into the complexities of human behavior, the quest for justice, and the indomitable spirit of survival. Together, let's continue to explore the stories that matter, shedding light on the darkness and celebrating the strength of those who rise above it.